Hello, this is Carson Winter back with another mathematics test guide. This will be 2023 Invitational B. Let's begin. The equation for kinetic energy is K equals 1/2 mv squared. K is energy in joules, m is mass, and v is velocity. Find the mass of the object, the kinetic energy of that, and velocity of that. Just plug those things into the equation and solve for m, and you will get 1.04. Number 2, consider a line that contains points 3, 8, and -4, -6. The point A, 14 lies on L1 was the value of A. Go to stat edit, put the X values in L1 and Y values in L2. Go to calculate linear regression and story regression in Y1. And then you just simply go to EQ solver and figure out which value of Y of X gets you 14. And if you do that, you'll get a value of 6. Consider three consecutive prime numbers such that their sum of the numbers is 143. Find the product of the numbers. Well, they're consecutive, so they're pretty near each other. So 143 divided by 3 is 47.6, so they're around that number. And analysis of the prime numbers near there reveals that 43, 47, and 53 are the numbers you are looking for. Multiply them together and you get B. For the measure of minor arc AB and measure of minor arc CD is 128 and 112. Find BEC. Well, how it works is all four of these arcs have to add up to 360. So as it happens, the sum of these two, or the average of these two arcs, is this angle, or these two angles right here. This angle is 120, and since this angle is supplementary, that means that BEC is 60 degrees. Number 5. So yeah, you can see there, subtract these sides from 360, then divide by 2, because there's 2 there. Pizza Heaven and Rankin, large pizza costs that much, plus toppings, Coke costs that much, Tubbs family. Okay, that's just a lot of words, but basically you just add up all the values together. 2 point by number of Cokes, add them all up, and then you have to also add an unknown X here, and then that value is multiplied by 1.08 because there's an 8% sales tax, and that value costs a total of, all that together costs a total of 62.37, which yields a salad cost of 4.75. 6. Mr. Clayton plans to hire Alexis, Skyly, and Arthur to paint 40 classrooms. This dude can paint it in 8 hours, this dude in 9 hours, and this dude in 10. They work together. How many hours are required to paint the 40 classrooms? Well, in this case, we can imagine the amount of classrooms they do as a rate. So Alexis paints one classroom every 8 hours, so 1/8 of a classroom every hour. And then Skyly is 1/9, and Arthur is 1/10. And then all that has to be multiplied by some unknown amount of time to result in 40 classrooms being painted. And put that in EQ solver, and you get an X value of 119. Number 7, my final grade is determined by 4 tests in the final exam, which counts twice. Scores 86, 82, 89, 95. What do I need to get an average of 90, 89.5, and the final counts twice? So the average is all the values combined together, divided by the total number. The final counts twice, so that's why there's this 2 there, and this value is dividing by 6. Because 1, 2, 3, 4, and then your final 2 times. And if you have to figure out what value of X makes that 89.5, and you get 93. 8. Siep is driving his random car at 75 miles per hour. If the radius of his tires is 16 inches, what is the rotational speed? Well, it's in rotation per minute, so the rotation of a car is based on the circumference of its wheel, as you can imagine. So basically, what you have to do is convert 75 miles per hour to inches per minute, because that inches will be converted to rotations. So 75 times 5 to 80 feet times 12 inches, divide by 60 minutes in an hour. And then once you have that, the rotations is the distance in inches divided by the circumference. So you simply divide that 16 inches times 2 times pi to get the circumference. And if you do that, you get 788 rotations per minute. Number 9, equilateral triangle as the side length. Find the circumference of a circle as same area. This is not, yeah, this is 2, yeah, this is correct. The area of an equilateral triangle is side squared over 4 times square root of 3. And that is equal to sum radius squared times pi. And then once you use EQ solver to get that radius, the circumference is 2 pi r. And if you do that, you get 32.7. 10 through 11. Circle of center O shown on the right. The length of chord AB is 12. The area of the circle is that. Find the measure of arc AB. Well, r squared, radius squared times pi is equal to that area. You'll get an r value of basically 13. And then once you have that, you got to figure out this angle right here. So sine -1 of 24 over 2, or 12, because this is half, over your 13. And then since this is dual-sided, you have to multiply by 2. And that will get you the measure of the arc AB. Because that's what the definition of a measure of an arc is, basically. The angle of a central angle from it, or that creates it. And if you do that, you get 134.8. Then find the area bounded by the minor arc in the chord. So basically this thing right here. So what you do is, first off, you got to find the area of the part of the circle that engulfs this entire thing. That is based on the degrees here, based on over the total 360 degrees of a circle times the circle area. So the area of the circle right here, or, r squared times pi, times your measure, divided by your total 360 degrees in your circle. And then you have to subtract this triangle that's formed over here. And the area of a triangle is the side that you're using squared times the sine of your angle over 2. So that's what this is right here. And if you do that, you'll get an area of 138.7. Okay, if triangle ABC is similar to triangle DEC, AB is equal to that, AC is equal to 8, and DE is equal to that. I mapped everything out. If it's similar, then that means since you see this is 10 and this is 7, and that means that each side on or DEF is 7/10 of that side on AC. So 7 over 10 times 8 is 5.6. 13, the Fibonacci series, the stuff here. Well, the sum of a Fibonacci series is the sum of the last term times 2 plus the second to last term minus the second term right here. So if you do that, you'll do 903 times 2 plus 558 minus 9. This is something that you should know if you do number sense test, and maybe it's appeared on a calculator test in history. I don't know. Probably not any I've seen. 14, consider an arithmetic series whose fourth term is that and ninth term is that. Find the sum of the first 13 terms. Well, you got to figure out the common difference. So after 5 times the common difference, to go from fourth term to ninth term, it increases by 40. So the common difference is that 40 divided by 5 and 8. Then you go find a 0th term. So 33 minus 8 times 4 to get 1. And then you have to do the sum, go to your calculator, math, and then summation, and go from the sum from x equals 1 to 13 of that 0th term plus 8 times x to add up all the terms from 1 to 13. 15, geometric series. This value is 23 and 4 over 27. This one is 48. Some ratio is multiplied 1, 2, 3, and 4 times to go from here to here. So you need the fourth root of that proportion. If you do that, you get an r value of 5/6. And then b is that original 48 times that r value squared. So times r times r. You do that, you get 33.3 repeating. 16, the sum of the first 8 terms in the sequence is, well, you can go from your 48 if you want, or you could find the 0th term by multiplying 48 by 6 over 5. Either way, you will do your summation calculator method again and take the sum of all the values. So if you're doing starting at 48, it would be sum from 0 to 7 of your original 48 times r powered to how many times you had to do it to get to that term, times r once to get here, r squared to get here, r cubed to get here, etc. If you do that, you'll get a value of 221. Right circular cone has this diameter and this slant height. Find the volume. Well, the volume of the cone is radius squared times pi times height over 2, over 3. So you have your radius squared right here. You have your pi, and then you need your height. You have your slant height, which looks like this. It's 10 long. And then you have your diameter, which looks like this, which is 12 long. So to get from this point in the middle to go up is half of that. So this height right here would be 10 squared minus 6 squared by Pythagorean theorem. And then you divide by 3 at the end to get 301.6. 18. Madison takes 4 days to drive from there to there, distance of that long. Drives 485 miles at that speed, that far at that speed, and that far at that speed. What is the average speed Madison must travel? On Thursday to have an overall speed of 63 miles per hour. So an interesting fact about how distance and speed works with average speed. The distance you travel over the speed that you travel it, if you add up all those values, you will get the total distance over the average speed. So that's what we're doing here. Distance over speed, plus distance over speed, plus distance over speed. Then our distance we travel on Thursday is everything we have not traveled left by our unknown speed that we're looking for. And all of that is equal to total distance over total speed. You could probably prove it with some remodeling of the distance speed equals distance over time formula, but I'm just telling you how to do it. I'm not going to prove it for you. And if you do that, you get 63.5 miles per hour. 19. Coach Perkins has 3 posts, 8 wings, and 4 guards. His starting lineup must consist of 1 post, 2 wings, and 2 guards. Many starting lineups are possible. Okay, in this scenario, it doesn't matter what the order at which someone is chosen doesn't seem to matter. So you're going to be using combination. So you're essentially using, so how you do is combination, your total number of positions, so 3 posts, and then how many you're selecting, so 1. So 3 combination 1 times 8 wings combination 2 wings times 4 wings or 4 guards combination 2 guards. To get the combination, go to your calculator, math, scroll right until you get the prob, and then NCR. And then put in those values and you get 504. 20. Plug it into the equations. It doesn't get much more simple than this. Cube root of 64 is 4. 4 power 3 over 2 is 8. Times 17 is 136. That could be a number sense question. Like, come on. Okay. Find the remainder when x powered to 4 minus 3 is divided by that value. You could do your long division. It's kind of hard to write down and explain, but basically you figure out what value you multiply x squared by to get to this x powered to 4. That value is x squared, as you can see here. And then you have to add on an extra x squared because you multiplied this -1 by x squared. And then that means that to get rid of that x squared, you now have to multiply x squared by 1. So x squared plus 1, and then you have your remainder left over, which is 1 minus 3. Alternatively, I'm not sure it works with x squared, but you can also just plug in 1 to this equation, and I believe it'll get you the correct answer, because that's an interesting fact about how remainders work. I don't know for sure if it works with this x squared, but it did in this problem, so I would trust it. 22, when the vector that is converted to polar coordinates, one correct answer is 17.8 at a specific angle. You gotta figure out what that angle is. So you can do, this is your y, this is your x, so our angle is going to be tangent -1 of y over x. And then tangent repeats itself every 180 degrees, So add and subtract 180 until you get to one of these values. If you do that, you'll get a value of negative 195.5 as your valid answer. 23 to 24, AB is parallel to CD, and CD is perpendicular to BE. AB is 8, CD is 4.75, and CE is 10.5. What is AC? Well, in this case, how triangles work is that the opposite, because this angle is the same, this opposite over this hypotenuse is proportional to this opposite over the entire hypotenuse. So you would do 8 over 4.75 times 10.75, and that would get AE. And then you have to subtract this 10.5 to get AC. And if you do that, you get 7.18. Then you find the area of region 1. What we're basically doing is we're doing Pythagorean theorem. This AE squared minus AB squared, square root of that gets you this entire bottom thing. And then 10.5 squared minus 4.75 squared, square root of that gets DE. Subtract DE from BE to get BD. And then you take the average of these two sides and multiply it by BD, and you get 40.84. On Rehop's farm, the number of cows varies inversely with the number of pigs and directly with the number of chickens squared. When there are 400 cows, he had 20 chickens, 40 pigs. How many cows will he have when there are only 4 pigs and 16 chickens? Well, okay, we have some unknown k value that we're looking for. That's the proportion value. And then it is inversely with the number of pigs, which means you are dividing by the number of pigs, and directly with the numbers of chickens squared, which means you're multiplying by the number of chickens squared. Figure out your k value from this equation, and then plug it right back in with the new chickens and new number of cows to get 5,000 or 2,560 cows. 26, if f of x is equal to 6x minus 1, h of x is equal to x squared plus 8, find h of f of 2. So it's about as simple as it gets again, just plug it in. F of 2 gets you 11, h of 11 is 129. 27, the roots of the equation are of this thing is that. Find b plus c. Well, this b value, since it's right next to the a, is negative sum of the roots times 12. So that's b over a is the sum of the roots on any given equation like this. And then c over a, which because it's the last element, means it's the product of the roots over this a. And if this exponent was odd, you would have to take the negative of it, because you're basically subtracting the roots in every time. So the double negatives cancel out in this case. Basically what that means is take the sum of these roots, multiply it by -1, add it to the product of the roots, and multiply it by 12, and you get -8. 28, members of Elkin's, 6 people on Elkin's math team sit around the large circular table with their coach. There are 7 seats. How many seating arrangements were possible? Well, in this case, there are 7. There are 7 seats, so that would be 7 factorial ways you could sit. However, because it's circular, the spot where the first person sits doesn't matter. So you divide by 7 and get 720. 29. X squared plus y squared minus 8x minus 12y minus 36 is equal to that. It's the equation with a circle of an area of, okay, basically we need to move everything over to here, or all the constants over to here, and assign these inside of to x minus 4 squared, for example. So do that. First off, you're going to put your 36 over here. And then you're going to change x squared minus 8x to x minus 4 squared, which means you have to add another 16 because that equation produces a 16 on this side. Then you do the same thing for y minus 6 squared. So 36 plus 8 over 2 squared plus 12 over 2 squared gets you is r squared. And then you multiply that value by pi to get 276.46. Okay, 30. Find the acute angle formed by the two intersecting lines. Shown on the right. Okay. Well, you can imagine these lines as such as kind of vectors. this vector starts at here and goes here. So it has an x increase of 4, or I'm talking about this one, an x increase of 4 and a y decrease of 4. And then this vector over here would have an x increase of 4 and a y increase of 4. Then you do the equation for angle between two vectors, which is the dot product of those vectors, so 8 times 8 plus 4 times negative 4, over the square root, or over the square root of both of these sides squared for each one of them. They are identical in this case, so you square that value. And then once you do that, you get a value of 53.13 if your calculator is in degree mode. 31, the asymptotes of the hyperbola are graphed on the right if the equation of the hyperbola is yada yada yada. And one of the vertices is at point, m plus n is equal to that. What? Okay, well, what you gotta realize is the slope in this case is, actually it's negative 1/2, or negative 1/2, which means that this value here is going to be this value multiplied by 2 times 2 squared to get a squared right here. So a squared is going to be 16 in that case. That's how hyperbolas work with their asymptotes. Each thing is kind of the change in y squared plus change in x squared. So a squared is 16, which means an x value must be 4 greater or less than this h value centered here to produce 1. So as such, the vertex can be 4 this way and 4 this way. So the point that works for this is -2, -2, which adds up to -4.0. And in general, on these problems like this is a good problem to do the 0.0 guess if you don't know it, where you simply guess the answer with 0.0 in it, and it's oftentimes correct. Next problem. The perimeter of a regular octagon is 32. What is the area of it? The area of a given polygon is one side squared times the number of sides over 4 over tangent of 180 divided by the number of sides. That is the equation for the area of a polygon. You should probably remember that because this appears on basically every single math test. If you plug that in, you get a value of 77. 33, find the distance from point A to line BC. Well, you can rewrite BC in standard form, where you basically write in terms of some value times x plus some value times y is equal to some intercept. Well, in this case, there is one increase in y for every 2 increase in x. So 2 and 1 here. And then x would have, if it went over there to produce a positive slope, it would be x plus 8 over 2, y equals x plus 8 over 2. So that's why this is negative right here. Then once you have that, you can use the equation for distance from a point, where you simply plug in the x value of A, plug in the y value of A, and subtract this 8 right here. So 8 times -1 plus -8 times 2 minus 8. And then you divide it by the Pythagorean of these two sides. So 1 squared plus 2 squared, or technically -1 squared plus 2 squared. And if you do that, you will get a distance of -14.3. And obviously, it's the same thing as 14.3 in this case, because distance doesn't care about direction. Draw the auxiliary lines, those things. Find the perimeter of the triangle. In this case, we can use our shoelace program. Put the chords of each point into L1 and L2. So L1 should have -4, 4, and 8. L2 should have 2, 6, and -8. And then once you do that, go to polygon, 3 sides, or 3 sides of 3, shoelace, and it will give you the perimeter and the area on question 635. 36, at 6 a.m., the hour hand and minute hand point opposite directions. How long till they point the same direction? Okay, now that I'm looking at it, there's a different method you could use, but essentially use the clock program. I mean, go to our program, clock, put in the number of hours, put in the number of minutes, and it'll get you 32.7. But since that you know they are opposite apart, that means you can do the constant 360 over 5.5 that you would add to get to the second and third times that points are in clocks or the hands are in the same direction, and simply divide by 2 to get your answer as well. Allison Engineering has 3 open positions, 12 A&M grads, 10 UT grads. The first position must be filled by an A&M grad. How many ways can these positions be filled? The order of the specific position does indeed matter in this case. I tried it with it not mattering. It takes a while and it doesn't get an answer anywhere near here. So in that case, it would be you have your 12 possible A&M grads, and then both of them combine. So you have 21 left and then 20 left after 2 positions. Multiply them together and you get 5,040. Ivan wants a parametric equation to represent this graph, and x is equal to negative t plus 3. And so basically just replace x with negative t plus 3 and expand, and you'll get this equation right here. Essentially, this is minus 30 if you simplify even more. Do that, and you get c for your a plus b plus c. Okay, 39, this is going to be your 3D shoelace problem. Put each of these x values into L1, y values into L2, z values into L3. Then you go to your polygon, 4 sides, 3D shoelace, and you get an area of 67.6. 40, if the parabola on the right intersects the line at point A and B, then what is AB? You'll want to use stat edit to create linear regression for this line and a quadratic regression for this line, store them in y1 and y2. And then you can use our OXOR no inputs because they're looking for the intersection already. And it will give you both the distance of 13.3 between the points of intersection and the area of 42.7. 42, consider this graph right here, which the following are true. F of x is continuous at those 2 values. If it was not continuous, that would mean that their bottom of this equation has to be equal to 0, because that would create either an asymptote or a, why can't I remember the name? Removable discontinuity. So you can check, negative 7 does indeed cause this to be 0, but x equals 4 does not, and therefore it is not, this statement is false. Vertical lines, x equals negative 7 and x equals 2.5 are vertical asymptotes. They do create a bottom of 0 for both. However, to be a vertical asymptote, the top must be positive or non-zero on those x values, which for negative 7 is not correct. And then the horizontal line y equals 0.5 is horizontal asymptote. Horizontal asymptote is the coefficients of the most important factor, this time x squared, so 1 over 2, and which is correct. So your answer is B. Okay, if 43 is equal to secant of x, then d squared y over dx squared. Well, dy over dx of secant is secant tangent. That is a property you should know. And then to do that, you take the derivative of the function again. So you do product rule, derivative of secant times tangent. So secant tangent times tangent plus secant times the derivative of tangent. So secant times secant squared. And if you do that, you get a value, you get the equation of A. 44, the first floor of a student fitness building consists of a rectangle or semicircle at each end. 200-meter track runs around the outside. If they wanted to maximize the rectangular area, what should the radius of the semicircle be? So, logical fact about maximizing the area of a rectangle, that's the same thing as a square, pretty much. It's a square in this case. So yeah, you have your square there, and you need your radius to go up and meet the top of this track to have it be the maximum value, but it must reach this end. So what you got to realize is that this radius is equal to 1/2 of the length of this square. So x as your radius, and then plus 2x plus x must be equal to the diameter of the circle. And since the diameter of the circle is 200 over pi, or the circumference over pi, divide that value by 4, and you get 15.9. Find the area of one petal of the rose curve this. In this case, you can graph this into R. I'll show you how I would do it. You graph this into R, so go to mode, convert your function to polar, put it in your calculator, make sure you're on radians. And then once you have that, I would do the integral from 0 to, normally it would be 2 pi. Well, first off, you guys see how many rose petals form. 3 rose petals form, okay? So you would do 2 pi over those 3 rose petals. And then you put in that equation and you square it. So the integral of that equation squared and divide by 2. Now, however, sometimes the equation will rewrite rose petals. So in this case, if you do that, you get a value 2 times the correct answer. So you just have to divide by 2 to counteract that. I personally just like to be safe because I can always divide by 2 if I need to. So I always go with 2 pi over 3. If they add some other value, I need to be like 6 cosine of 3 theta plus 0. I'd need to be more careful, but that wouldn't create rose petals anyway. 4.6. Consider the graph shown on the right, the trapezoidal approximation with 6 subintervals. It creates this with these 2 bounds and these 2 bounds. What is the trapezoid shown on the right? Put these 2 equations into it, and then you can use your approximation for the Riemann equation. So you have 6. You are using a trapezoid, so you have 6 subintervals. You have your lower bound is x equals 4, higher bound is x equals 16. Put that in the approximation method, and you'll get 61.29. 47, find the exact area. Well, there's 2 ways you can do it. One, you can use the Oxor program, or just, figure out the integral from 4 to 16 of this. Oxor, yes, lower bound, higher bound, irrelevant number. Or you could do the approximation, but make it 500 trapezoids, or something like that. So it's basically, it'll get you like 61.3332 or something. 48, Newton's law of cooling states that the rate of change in an object is proportional to the difference between the object's temperature and the temperature of surrounding medium. Consider an object placed in a room kept at that constant temperature. At the beginning, the temperature is that. After 15 minutes, the temperature is that. And when is the temperature 90 degrees? Okay, we do have a program for this. It is called the diffeq program. So go to diffeq. This is going to be, basically the equation of the temperature looks like this. So this is diffeq from above. And you know your y. You're looking for a value with a given y. So initial is going to be 120 degrees. Your first x is at 15 minutes, and that temperature at that x is 105. And then your constant temperature is 55 right there. And your final y is 90. You'll get a time of 35.4. Navid is evaluating this integral using integration by parts. The best choice for dv is, well, basically you want something that is easy to integrate. Arcsine is pain to integrate, so don't do that. Arcsine of x, but you need to integrate something, so you have this dx left over. So the only thing you can integrate in this case, or technically you can integrate this, but the only thing relatively easy to integrate is dx. And this x, it does appear here, but it's technically not a separate entity, so it can't be dv. Okay? In this case, which of the following tests will show this series converges? Well, you can go through all the terms, figure out and why they don't work. The nth term test can only prove divergence. The p-series test is it's 1 over value power to another value. This equation is way too complicated for that test. This is not a geometric series, and I don't even, this is like barely even a thing. I'm not even sure what it would do, but the answer is clearly the integral test. You take the integral of this equation and you prove that it's finite. You can use the integral test on almost any equation technically. You want to prove convergence or divergence. Consider the function f of x is equal to x squared. When is the first local minimum? Well, minimums occur when the derivative of the function is equal to 0, and the slope has to be going from negative to positive to make it look like this. So if you plug in the derivative of sine of x squared, that happens when x is equal to 2.17. Then you use the first non-3-0 terms of the Maclaurin series. So what that means is the Maclaurin series is basically a function squared function of 0 plus derivative of function of 0 times x over 1 factorial plus the second derivative of the function times x squared over 2 factorial, and so on. So there's a few things that happen here. First off, the Maclaurin series for sine is something you should probably know. It's like the x term minus the x cubed term plus the x power to fifth term, etc. So as you see, that's here. However, each x must be squared because this sine is based on x squared. So you have first derivative times x squared over 1 factorial minus third derivative times x powered to 3. All that has to be squared and then over 3 factorial, and the same thing for your x powered to fifth, or technically x powered to 10th term, and you'll get this value right here. Okay, Eric was initially disappointed when he learned he made a 72 on his Cal 3 test. The professor reveals that the test scores were approximately normal with mean of 60 and standard deviation of 5. V score is the standard deviations away from the mean. So 72 minus 60 over your standard deviation of 5 gets 2.4. The calculations place them in the 99th percentile. You got to figure out how many values are worse than 2.4 times your z-score, which is 0, which is a score based on a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. So negative 9999999, higher of 2.4, and then mean of 0, standard deviation of 1, yields like 0.99. Next problem. Okay, bunch of data. Put it into L1. Looking at the questions, this actual season doesn't seem to matter at all. So just put in all these values into L1 and then do stat 1 edit var stats. Okay, and then we can begin. If you can go to stat, then go to calculate, then do 1 var stats. The mode of the data is the one that appears the most. So there's only one thing that appears twice, which is 46. The mean of the data is the equivalent of x bar on your 1 var stats, so 47.4. And outliers. How outliers are determined is based on the distance between the third quartile and the first quartile times 1.5 plus the higher one, and that value, and the lower one minus that difference. So if you do that, you get a bound of 64 and 32, I believe. So anything greater than 64 or less than 32 is an outlier, which is D. Okay, 58. Researchers are interested in the relationship between obesity and heart disease. Suppose person randomly selected. What is the probability that one of the two males selected would have heart disease? So first of all, okay, we're figuring out the probability of heart disease, not obese. Heart disease. That was an error, mistyping error on my part. So basically, first off, there's a 0.16 chance that the person is obese and has heart disease. But since the percent chance a person is obese is 0.28, The percent chance a person is not obese is 1 minus that value, or 0.72. And from that 0.72, 0.65 do not have heart disease, which leaves 0.07 left to have heart disease while not being obese. So add those two values together and you get 0.23. Then the value that it happens at least once is 1 minus the chance that it does not happen twice. So in that case, you would get 0.407. 59, two people compare mean scores. They want to see if there's a difference between them. So you got to find the expected value of the difference. Well, that's simply the difference in the means. So 23 minus 19 is 4. And find the standard deviation of their difference. That would be the that would be this value squared plus this value squared and square root of that. So the Pythagorean value of the standard deviations, basically. And if you do that, you get a value of 5. And that will be the entire test. If you have any questions, leave a comment and I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, you can continue taking tests, hopefully look at some of my other videos. See you later.